also Professor Widodo, and also Professor Thomas Boving, our speaker from Department of Geoscience, the University of Rhode Island, and also for all the audiences, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. Welcome to the Water Quality webinar with title Challenges for 21st Century, Emerging Pollutants and Health Issue, hosted by Environmental Engineering, Universitas Islam Indonesia, in collaboration with ICMI and also the University of Rhode Island. I'm Noviani Imawanto Putri from Department of Engineering, Environmental Engineering will be moderator in this webinar. To start this webinar, let us listen the opening remark first from Ibu Ani Juliani, PhD, from the Environmental Engineering Universitas Islam Indonesia. Bu Ani, time is yours.
Baik, bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam.
Alhamdulillahirabbil alamin wassalatu wassalamu ala asrofil anbiya'i wal mursalin wa ala alihi washabihi ajmain. Amma ba'du. Pada yang terhormat Bapak Dr. Haji Hamim Zarkali Putro MSI sebagai Ketua 3 Ikatan Cendekiawan Muslim Indonesia Orwell DIY, to Professor Thomas Boving from the Department of Geosciences, University of Rhode Island, USA, to Professor Bapak Widodo Brontowiono, beliau adalah Ketua Bidang Lingkungan Hidup dan Kesehatan Masyarakat, ICMI Orwell DIY, dan juga beliau adalah Guru Besar di Jurusan Teknik Lingkungan UI. Juga yang terhormat Bapak Ibu, pada seluruh mahasiswa peserta webinar pada sore hari ini. And firstly, please allow me to speak in Bahasa and maybe mix with little English, especially to Professor Thomas Boving. So please allow me to speak in Bahasa in general. So firstly, of course, puji dan syukur kita panjatkan kehadirat Allah Subhanahu Wa Taala atas nikmat hat dan luang sehingga kita bisa berkumpul pada sore hari ini dalam acara webinar, dan insya Allah semoga acara sore hari ini mendapatkan berkah dan rahmat dari Allah Subhanahu Wa Taala. Amin. Dan kita juga tidak lupa haturkan salawat dan salam kepada junjungan kita Rasulullah Muhammad SAW. Semoga kita mendapatkan syafaat dari beliau di akhir hari nanti. Bapak Ibu sekalian, peserta webinar pada sore hari ini, sekali lagi mungkin saya sampaikan, saya mewakili, saya sebetulnya adalah ketua program studi teknik lingkungan, dan saya mewakili Bapak Waludin Nurmianto yang hari ini tidak bisa bergabung pada sore hari ini karena sedang bertugas di Banjarmasin, sehingga saya mewakili beliau. Perlu saya sampaikan bahwa acara pada sore hari ini merupakan kolaborasi antara Jurusan Teknik Lingkungan Universitas Islam Indonesia juga dengan ICMI, Ikatan Cendekiawan Muslim Indonesia Orwell DIY, khususnya bidang lingkungan hidup dan kesehatan masyarakat, serta University of Rhode Island, United States of America. So webinar kali ini topik yang diangkat adalah mengenai water quality challenges in 21st century, emerging pollutants and topik ini diangkat karena kita melihat bagaimana pentingnya air itu sangat penting untuk kehidupan kita, tetapi kita menghadapi berbagai tantangan terkait baik terkait kuantitas maupun kualitasnya, dan yang akan dibahas pada kali ini terutama adalah terkait kualitas, bahwa berbagai pencemaran akibat kegiatan manusia menyebabkan turunnya kualitas air yang tentu akan lebih jauh secara langsung atau tidak langsung akan mempengaruhi kesehatan kita gitu ya pada akhirnya. Dan kita menghadirkan Bapak Profesor Thomas Boving, ya, beliau akan memotret bagaimana tantangan masalah kualitas air di abad 21 ini dan terkait beberapa polutan yang mungkin kita tidak sadari pada sebelumnya dan sekarang menjadi pelan-pelan kita menyadari ada polutan-polutan, ada kontaminan-kontaminan di lingkungan yang ternyata juga sangat mengancam begitu ya, dan bisa akan mengupas hal tersebut. Demikian, semoga acara pada sore hari ini memberikan manfaat untuk kita semua. And to Professor Boving, we are really appreciate your willingness to provide your knowledge and your knowledge regarding this issue. And I hope we can share maybe in how is it in United States, how you handle these matters. Maybe we can discuss this later, and how also the situation in Indonesia and how we can participate, how can we can do something about this issue. Maybe hopefully we can get a fruitful discussion through this webinar. So once again, thank you very much for your presence here. Demikian mungkin Bapak Ibu sedikit remarks dari saya, sedikit sambutan dari saya. Mungkin terima kasih, saya kembalikan kepada moderator. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Terima kasih, thank you for Bu Ani. And the second remark, I would like to welcome Dr. Homim Zarkasih Putro MSI, Ketua 3 Ikatan Cendekiawan Muslim Indonesia. The time is yours.
Terima kasih. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Alhamdulillahirabbil alamin. Assalatu wassalamu ala anbiya'i wal mursalin. Asyhadu an la ilaha illallah wahdahu la syarikalah wa asyhadu anna Muhammadan abduhu wa rasuluh. Allahumma sholli ala Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa ashabihi wa mawalah amma ba'd. Prof. Tom, Prof. Widodo, dan Bapak-Bapak, Ibu-Ibu sekalian yang ikut webinar pada sore ini. Pertama, permohonan maaf Pak Ketua Umum tidak bisa bergabung pada sore ini karena ada acara yang lain yang bersamaan, sehingga mewakilkan saya untuk sedikit memberikan sambutan pada pembukaan ini, bahwa persoalan yang berkaitan dengan krisis air, kemudian masalah polusi, kemudian masalah polusi udara, kemudian berkaitan juga dengan regenerational continuity dan sebagainya, itu kalau Al-Quran kan mengingatkan kepada kita, wala tawil fasada fil ardi innallaha la yuhibbul mufsidin. Dan janganlah suka membuat kerusakan di muka bumi, karena sesungguhnya Allah tidak menyukai orang-orang yang berbuat kerusakan. Nah, kita sekarang sedang membicarakan tentang ya perubahan-perubahan global ini tidak bisa tidak memang menjadikan lingkungan kita menjadi lingkungan yang kurang kondusif untuk kehidupan anak-anak cucu kita. Tetapi kita punya tanggung jawab bersama untuk setidak-tidaknya mengurangi percepatan dari kerusakan lingkungan itu. Dan webinar kita pada sore ini, saya kira termasuk salah satu dari upaya untuk bagaimana menghambat atau memperlambat pengerusakan ekosistem kita, sehingga kita akan meninggalkan kepada generasi setelah kita adalah bumi yang lebih enak, bumi yang lebih menjanjikan, dan sudah barang tentu akan memberikan kehidupan yang lebih baik kepada generasi setelah kita. Dan terima kasih atas kerjasamanya Prodi Teknik Lingkungan UII, kemudian juga kolaborasi yang lain. Semoga kegiatan kita tetap berlanjut dan akan memberikan sumbangan yang besar bagi perkembangan dan kemajuan pendidikan di Indonesia pada khususnya dan perdamaian dunia pada umumnya. Terima kasih, saya kembalikan kepada moderator. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Terima kasih Bapak Dr. Hamim yang sudah menyampaikan sambutannya mewakili ICMI DIY. Baik Bapak Ibu, teman-teman semua, acara ini juga disiarkan secara live di YouTube. Jadi bagi yang mungkin koneksi internetnya kurang bersahabat, bisa melihat melalui YouTube seperti itu, nggih. Okay, as we know that water quality topic is always interesting because as long as we live, we will need water in our daily life. But along with the development of human and also infrastructure and also industries and so on, maybe the quality of water is getting worse. And also in our department in environmental engineering, we have conducted some research about the water quality, and we found that our water is contaminated by bacteria, and also research about the microplastic, and also now the ambient pollutant also become our concern. And today, in this afternoon, here we have our special guest. I will greet him first, Professor Thomas Boving. Hello. Okay, you still mute here. Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes, loud and clear. Thank you.
Okay, yeah, thank you. How are you today, Mister?
Very good, very good.
Very good, yeah. I hope you enjoy Yogyakarta.
Oh, Jakarta is lovely. I love Jakarta.
Okay, yeah. Professor Thomas Boving will share with all of us about the challenge for 21st centuries, emerging pollutant, and also health issue. And Professor Thomas Boving is a professor in the Department of Geoscience in University of Rhode Island, USA, and have expertise in the hydrogeological. He is also our family here because almost once a year he come to Yogyakarta, visit us, and also give lecture to our students. So he has become our family. And for the audience, please, you can prepare your question to Professor Thomas Boving for our discussion session after he deliver the materials. And for Professor Thomas Boving, the time is yours.
Thank you so much, Noviani, and I assume I can share I can share my screen with everybody. Let me see. Can everybody see my PowerPoint screen?
Yes, under okay.
Wonderful.
Okay, good. Yes, already good.
Oh, good, good, good. All
Very
right. Good. So first of all, thank you, Ismi, everybody, to have me here today. It's a great honor to speak to you, and I'm hoping I give an interesting presentation, which lasts about 35-40 minutes, and then hopefully we have a lot of time afterwards to talk about some of the emerging pollutant and health issues that I'm touching upon. My name is Thomas Boving. I'm with the University of Rhode Island, Department of Geosciences. I have an appointment also with the Department of Civil Environmental Engineering. I'd like to especially thank Professor Widodo, for inviting me and making this possible. Ibu Ani for helping me so nicely during my time, and Ibu Noviani for introducing me so nicely. Pak Kamin, thank you again for having me during this meeting. It was already mentioned, but I say it again. I'm a professor of geology, hydrogeology. Originally, I'm from Germany. I was born there. I was living in Germany for about 30 years. I got my diploma or master's degree from the University of Tübingen. I worked in Germany as an environmental consultant for a couple of years. And then I got accepted into the PhD program in hydrology at the University of Arizona, which then I completed in 1999 and have been at the University of Rhode Island ever since. I'm a full professor, and I'm also the co-author of the leading textbook in my field titled Contaminant Hydrogeology. Currently, I'm a visiting faculty member at the Universitas Islam Indonesia under a Fulbright Specialist program. And this allows me to give guest lectures and basically spend almost a month in Jakarta, and that makes me very happy. So my areas of research are innovative remediation technologies for contaminated soil and groundwater. So there are a lot of instances where soil and groundwater is polluted with industrial or by-industrial activities. Accidents can happen. And one of my research areas is to find out how can we clean up these polluted soils. And lately, this is also including in emerging contaminants. And I will talk about emerging contaminants in just a minute. But let me also talk about my other areas of research, and that is sustainable water treatment, which means technologies that are suitable for, let's say, rural villages far away from the urban centers, villages that may not have access to technology because of expense, because of complexity. So I'm working a lot in India and Indonesia, hopefully more in the future, on testing simple, cost-effective technologies to provide rural communities with clean water. And lastly, I work on saltwater intrusion into coastal aquifers. And I show you in a minute, Rhode Island is a coastal state, and the issue of saltwater intruding into our drinking water is very much a problem in Rhode Island, as well as in Indonesia, as well as in many other places around the world. So if you don't know where Rhode Island is, you've been forgiven, because most Americans don't know where Rhode Island is. It's a very small state. It's in fact the smallest state in the United States. Hopefully you can see my mouse, my pointer here. This is Providence. Providence is the capital of Rhode Island. Rhode Island is so small, it's basically not noticeable on the large map of the US. We are talking the Northeast, the New England region. And Rhode Island sits between Massachusetts and Connecticut. New York City is here, about 2 hours away, and Boston is about an hour away. It's a very beautiful state. We have a lot of coastline. People come here to Rhode Island for vacation. It's a very popular tourist place, a lot of boating going on, forest, and so on and so on. But in the summer, it gets cold. So, sorry, in the winter, it gets cold. In the summer, it's beautiful. In the winter, it gets cold. So if you plan to visit Rhode Island, please do so in summer. My university, we have about 18,000 students, about 800 faculty. The university is over 130 years old. And we have some historic buildings, and we have brand new buildings, like the engineering building. And it's a very lively community. We do work on many fields of science, engineering, social science, and so on and so on. And yeah, it's a beautiful place to be a professor. Okay, that was enough about me. More important, what are we talking about here today? The outline is shown here. First, I wanted to review some challenges regarding water quality and quantity in Indonesia. I think it's important that we have a picture of what is happening in our environment. And when I come to a country, to a new country, then the first thing I do is to make myself knowledgeable about the challenges. Because I'm a hydrogeologist, these are water quality and water quantity challenges. And then we talk about emerging contaminants. I introduce you to what are contaminants, emerging contaminants, and we talk about health issues related to these. And then I finish with an outlook. All right, so the good news is Indonesia has a lot of water. In fact, Indonesia has more water than there is demand. So availability exceeds demand, and that's great news. The only problem is that the groundwater, the water in general, is not distributed equally. In some parts of the country, there's a great excess of water, like Papua or Kalimantan, where together they have about 70% of all the water resources in Indonesia, but only 13% of the total population. And they're largely not industrialized, so there's a lot of water for very few people. But in Java, for example, where most Indonesians live, the water is already stressed to the degree that there's not enough water to go around. So good news is there is enough water. The bad news is it's not equally distributed. And that leads to water stress in some areas. In this picture, you see data from 1990 to about today. And the blue line is increasing, indicating that the water stress in Indonesia is continuously increasing. It is about 30% now, meaning that about 30% of the country is stressed for water. This is data from the World Bank, and it clearly shows that the situation is not getting any better, but worse. On top of that, Indonesia experiences flood hazards. Again, it depends on where you are at what time of the year. Not all areas are flood prone, but as you know, if you're from Java and other low-lying areas in Kalimantan or Sumatra, flood is an issue. And about almost 21 million people in Indonesia are affected by flooding each year. And that number is expected to grow significantly because urban cities in low-lying coastal areas like Jakarta are expanding rapidly. And on top of that, we have climate change and associated sea level rise, with all impact the flooding and making it worse. And the big problem, besides the property damage that results from flooding, is that these floodwaters are polluted. And people coming in contact with polluted floodwater can suffer from serious health effects. So it is a public issue, and it's also a health issue. All right, so let's talk about groundwater. So rivers, surface water, groundwater is the water resource below the subsurface. And again, the news is good. Indonesia could satisfy its entire water demand from groundwater. There's plenty of groundwater around, but with surface water, it is not available everywhere. And here, in addition to unequal distribution, geology is also important, because geology dictates where groundwater can be stored in what we call aquifers. Aquifers are sediments or rock buried beneath the surface, which, like a sponge, can hold water. And once we start drilling a hole into the sponge and start pumping, then we can get the water out. So these type of geological structures, these aquifers, exist only in larger islands. Again, Kalimantan, Sumatra, Java, Papua. Some smaller islands, the groundwater is very limited because these aquifers don't exist or are very small on small islands. Now, it would be it's fair to say that these deep aquifers that deliver that groundwater are already very much overexploited in most urban areas. This is an issue in North Jakarta, in Bandung, Samarang, just to name a few cities in Indonesia. And what happens is, when groundwater is pumped from the ground, it's like a sponge being squished, meaning the sponge becomes smaller. And in real life, what that means is, when we pump out water, the surface starts sinking, or we call it land subsidence. It means that we pump out groundwater and the land starts sinking. That's the problem, because if you live next to an ocean, like in Jakarta, the last thing you need is living in a very flood-prone area, and then the soil under your feet is sinking on top of that. I show you 3 graphs here from a study published in the BBC, and it shows the problem of land subsidence in Jakarta. So what you see here is an outline of Jakarta. Here's the ocean. Okay, here's downtown Jakarta. And this is the picture in 1977. All is good. Flooding is a minor issue, no big deal. In 20 years later, 1997, people noticing that certain areas becoming flooded more regularly, mostly in northern Jakarta. And initially, the issue wasn't too bad and not too many people paid attention. 2007, again, 20 years later, it becomes much more obvious that something is going on. And again, especially North Jakarta. 2017, it's 2025 today. And this is the last slide, 2050. This is the prediction for Jakarta. It doesn't bode well. There are many areas in northern Jakarta that will be 4 or maybe 5 or even more meters below the sea level. How can we deal with that? That's a completely different talk, and I'm not even go there, but the issue is directly related to pumping groundwater from the subsurface that leads to land subsidence. Okay, so the other issue is, of course, water quality. So let's say we have enough water in a certain area. It doesn't mean the water is drinkable, can be consumed, because there may be pollution issues. And pollution may make water unusable in some areas. So let's talk about water quality. Here's a picture of Java showing which of the major rivers and watersheds are polluted. Red is the highest degree of pollution, and you can see that much of Java is in the category where the water is highly polluted. This is true for the east and west and middle of Java. Most of the rivers are already class 3 or even 4. We're judging the water quality in 4 categories, 1 and 2 being the best, 3 and 4 is very polluted and very, very polluted. And most of the rivers in Java falling into category 3 and even 4. So the situation is such that most surface water is heavily polluted, is unfit for human consumption, yet people still need to satisfy their water needs by tapping into rivers for domestic as well as for agricultural uses. In terms of groundwater, same issue. We're finding that, according to the Ministry of Mines and Energy, that all water in all large cities in Java is polluted. In Jakarta, the shallow groundwater is polluted with bacteria such as fecal coliform, and even worse when it comes to E. coli. These are indicator bacteria that indicate that sewage, untreated sewage, is being mixed into the ground, contaminating the groundwater, contaminating the drinking water. And about half of Jakarta's groundwater is polluted, if not more. So what are the principal contaminants in Indonesia? First of all, on top of the list are pathogens, bacteria, viruses, protozoa, related to untreated sewage. So untreated sewage is the big source of pathogens in water. We also have heavy metals and petroleum hydrocarbons related to mining or processing, refining and storage or sale of petroleum products. Next time you go to a gas station, think about where the gasoline is coming from. It is stored beneath your feet, below the surface, in huge tanks. These tanks may have a hole, nobody knows about it, and leaking petroleum can pollute a lot of water very quickly. What else? Nutrients, pesticides related to agriculture. And then lastly, coastal saltwater intrusion, which is a more localized problem related to overpumping, like I showed you in the case of Jakarta. So these are the major principal components. In addition, there are so-called emerging contaminants. And these are chemicals or materials that we don't know too much about. Information about these contaminants is only emerging. That's why we call them emerging contaminants, because we don't know too much about it. Every day there is more and more information available that these compounds are a threat to human health and need to be seriously considered in the future. Emerging contaminants include many things. First on my list are pharmaceuticals and personal care products, anything like shampoo, cosmetics, lifestyle, things like caffeine and so on. Next on the list are endocrine disrupting compounds. These are very nasty compounds, mostly hormones that are being released from humans or from medications. They're also released from animal factories and so on and so on. And they can do a lot of things. Other compounds, they have crazy names like per and polyfluorinated compounds or PFAS or brominated flame retardants, nanomaterials, microplastics, a long list of compounds where we don't know too much about it. And every day, like I said earlier, we're finding out about more. Now, I picked the pharmaceuticals to talk a little bit more about, because to me personally, I find it extremely scary that our water is laced with pharmaceuticals, compounds like antibiotics. And many of you may recognize some of these names like sulfamethoxazole, trimethoprim, ciproflox. These are antibiotics. Many of us use them, not hopefully daily, but once in a while. Also non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs like diclofenac, acetaminophen, or ibuprofen. These are very common drugs. Hormones, testosterone, progesterone, and so on and so on. And then lastly, lipid regulators. These are very common pharmaceuticals that we use almost daily, some of us. And where are they going? Where are they coming from? We know they're coming from the factory, but we ingest them, and then what? Let me show you what's happening. I just want to mention a few more compounds that you're probably familiar with, like coffee, artificial sweeteners, painkillers, insect repellents, fragrances and surfactants, and illegal drugs. All this is showing up in our drinking water. We're finding traces of all these compounds, and if ingested, it will have consequences. This is a study that was recently published all over Southeast Asia. The researchers looked for these compounds that I just mentioned, and red is Indonesia. So on this side, you see a bar chart, and every time you see red, it means water is polluted with these contaminants in Indonesia, and that's a lot. I mean, caffeine, sulfamethoxazole, trimethoprim, that's an antibiotic. So Indonesia is not the only place. Basically, every country all around the world has to deal with this problem, and that's an issue of global importance. When it comes to these chemicals, pharmaceuticals, personal care products in water, there are many health effects that can result from exposure. Anything from hypertoxicity, hormone imbalance, metabolic disorder, respiratory, neurologic, carcinogenic, genetic disorders. I mean, the list is long. And that's scary because exposure to these compounds is especially dramatic to small children, pregnant women, and possibly the elder. Exposure can have the highest effect on these target groups: children, pregnant women, and elder or people already sick to some degree. So besides these direct effects on our health, we should also worry because having antibiotic compounds in the water can lead to what is called antibiotic resistance, meaning bacteria becoming resistant to common antibiotic medication. That's bad because these bacteria, if they then in our body, let's say we are infected by antibiotic resistant bacteria, normal, regular antibiotic medicines do not work anymore. That's a big problem. It means we cannot fight simple diseases that we were able to treat just 10 years ago with the current toolbox of medications. It's not going to work anymore. That means people die because they will die and suffer from these infections. Also, why else should we care? Endocrine disruption, I mentioned this earlier. These are powerful chemicals that interfere with the hormone system in the human body. And that can lead to gender abnormalities, hermaphrodism, which is basically having a condition that people or animals developing both male and female reproductive organs. For example, here are two studies. One is about Arctic polar bears, so far away from industry in the northern hemisphere, far, far away. We're finding Arctic bears that have characteristics of both male and female. That's only explainable by these endocrine disrupting compounds making their way even to the last region in the world. And that's being done by atmospheric transport, by rain, and so on. We also see this in the water, where we find fish and frogs and other amphibians that have both male and female characteristics. And this is happening because of exposure to man-made compounds. So how do these compounds get into the environment, right? I mean, we all take medicines, we know that, but we usually keep these medications and then hopefully we put them into a container when done, but the story is a little bit more complicated. This picture basically explains it all. When you take medicine, a small fraction is actually only assimilated in your body. It can be 10%, maybe 40%. The rest goes right through your body, and when you go to the bathroom, it goes right into the water and then to the environment. Also, people tend to throw medications no longer useful into the toilet and flush it down. That's the main pathway for these contaminants entering our environment. That's simple. There's nothing more to say. We all do it. So it's happening. On top of that, and this is probably an outcome of COVID, pharmacies in Indonesia are now increasingly focusing on service like home delivery. That makes it easier to consume medications. If you make it easier to consume medication, it means the rate of consumption increases. It also means there's more pharmaceutical waste. There's a study from 2021, I have the source here, showing that also more Indonesians started treating themselves. The internet is there, so if you have a little ache, you Google, and all of a sudden Google tells you that you most likely have this and that. So you call your pharmacist and order 5 pounds of acetaminophen or whatever. The pharmacy will directly deliver it to you because they make money, right? Greater demand, and also e-prescription. So if you don't even want to go to the doctor, take a phone and tell them about your ache, and then you're going to get your medication very quickly. Happening in Indonesia, happening in the US and Germany, happening everywhere. Again, pharmaceuticals becoming a consumer product. And more pharmaceuticals make it into the environment with these health effects looming right behind. So what have we learned so far? We have heard that Indonesia is a water-rich country, very much so, but problem is the water is not equally distributed, and areas are in water stress because of not enough water being available or lack of infrastructure that brings water to the people. The main threats to water availability and quality is population growth, economic activities, and poor management of resources. And that includes the large absence of sewage water treatment plants. There's a huge lack of sewage water treatment plants, and this is something where environmental engineers have to come in because we built these and we know what to do. But there needs to be resources there to build these plants, right? And then lastly, we heard about emerging contaminants and how their presence amplifies the problem with water quality that already exists. So what can be done? What can be done about water pollution? So first, let's understand about water quality. What shall we expect from safe drinking water? Safe drinking water should be free of bacteria and viruses, no pathogens. It should be free of particulates. That means we want water that's clear, it's not cloudy, and particulates make the water cloudy. And we want water that has no inorganic or organic compounds, toxic compounds or precursors, meaning emerging contaminants. We don't want any of that in our water. How do we get there? Ideally with water treatment plants, drinking water treatment plants, wastewater treatment plants. These are very effective, very good technologies, but they come at a high cost and they're technologically complex. That means because of their cost, it's usually the urban areas that get these plants first, whereas the rural areas have to wait for many years, if not decades, before it's their turn. And on top of that, these treatment plants are really not designed to treat emerging contaminants. They're designed for bacteria, they're designed for heavy metals, maybe some other compounds, nutrients, but really not designed for emerging contaminants. So whatever treatment we have in the future, we have to add additional treatment to remove pharmaceuticals and all these drugs I was talking about. What other things can we do? We can buy bottled water. Okay, that's costly. If you have a family of 5 and have to supply bottled water every day, that's very costly. Therefore, people invest in their own reverse osmosis system, which are now becoming available and they're becoming less expensive. So it's one way to do it. Or as in this case, and this is a picture from Seram Island where I was in January, we visited a very remote village on Seram where the community came together and together with a private investor purchased an RO system and basically ensured that the entire community has enough water, and the villagers shared the cost of the system by each paying a certain amount for, let's say, 10 liters or 20 liters of water. I was very impressed by that because that's one way to address the water pollution problem. What else? We need bridge technologies. We need technologies that provide a temporary relief from water quality issues, particularly in rural areas. So until these rural areas can be served with drinking water treatment plants, they may need technologies that are much less expensive, easily sustainable, and acceptable by the local communities. And this is what I call bridge technologies. And such a technology is riverbank filtration. Riverbank filtration, I've been studying riverbank filtration for 15 years or maybe longer, is a natural system. Think about this way. The river here is, like any good river in the world, heavily polluted with sewage bacteria. It is unfit for drinking. However, the water can be cleaned by forcing it to flow through the sediments that surround the river. We call them alluvial sediments. So if we can force the river water to flow through the sediments towards a well, then we can make the water clean by natural processes. It's a completely natural process that removes bacteria and heavy metals. And so the trick is to find the right geologic conditions where we can drill a well some distance away from the river and pull in the water from the river to flow to the well. If we can achieve that, Mother Nature kicks in and cleans the water for no cost And the beautiful thing is this system will be effective for decades, if not much longer. This is a system that the Egyptians already used 3,000 years ago. And then we forgot about it because we believing in technology. And only very recently was this very simple system rediscovered, and it's now being used in Europe, in the US, in India, and so on and so on. In Indonesia, I don't think it's being used widely, if at all. And I think this is an interesting topic for future research. So what riverbank filtration can treat are the number of pollutants, including bacteria. Typically, we see a reduction in 99.9%. That's 3 orders of magnitude. 4 orders of magnitude is possible. Heavy metals are being reduced, pesticides, and most important, or very important, emerging contaminants can be reduced. Pharmaceuticals and personal care products. There are studies that clearly show that riverbank filtration can reduce the concentration of these contaminants. But what shall I tell you? Here's a picture from India, where we study riverbank filtration. This is from the river, clearly discolored, yellow. There's a lot of bacteria in there, and a lot of nasty things in there. And this is from a well that's about 30 meters away from the river. And this water is drinkable. I drank it myself, it tastes good. It is clean, there's no bacteria in there, no heavy metals. And all that is being done using natural system, no chemicals added. So I would love to see more research in this area together with our partners at UII or other partners in Indonesia. I see as a first step to identify suitable sites where riverbank filtration can be tested and demonstrated. People want to know. Most people are skeptical. They don't think we can actually do this, so we need to demonstrate it. And it would be great to start with a demonstration where we can demonstrate to people the power of riverbank filtration in Indonesia. Without going into too much detail, anything that we do should also include local communities, because ultimately this is our target group, and local communities have to buy into this technology, and this is an opportunity for them to elevate their life and health also, because without any other options, riverbank filtration technology may just be a sustainable technology suitable for local communities. Well, I don't want to take up so much time, so let me summarize what we have heard so far and give you a little bit of an outlook. So water quality and quantity, we have seen varies in Indonesia. Bacteria, heavy metals, nutrients, saltwater intrusion are the main issues. And on top of that, emerging contaminants. Because water treatment plants are expensive, not every community has them, but there are bridge technologies like riverbank filtration technology that can fill in the gap, be a bridge technology. Riverbank filtration can treat most water contaminants, with the exception of salinity, that cannot be treated. I have to be clear about that, but it treats emerging contaminants. What we need is a demonstration project or several demonstration projects to show that this works in Indonesia. I have no doubt it will. We just have to invest into this technology and show to the people that it can be done. The technology is so simple that it can then easily be replicated in other instances, and that's how we do it in India, for example, where riverbank filtration is now being widely used. But ultimately, what we're trying is to improve water quality, and water quality is because of inadequate behavior by people. If we can prevent pollution from happening, either industrial pollution, household pollution, whatever, that is the least expensive and most effective solution to fighting water quality in Indonesia, in the entire world. If we don't let pollution happen in the first place, it's going to be the easiest solution to a big problem. And that requires education, it requires outreach, it requires change of mind, and it also requires investment, because sometimes pollution is happening, so we need to invest into treatment plants and whatnot to prevent the pollution from spreading in the first place. And again, environmental engineering is the right field to study all this, to be involved with. And this is what I tell my young students. There's so many jobs out there in the future, now and in the future, where they can become active and help Indonesia or the United States or Germany to move towards a more clean, more sustainable environment. And that's it. Thank you for your patience, and I'm very happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Very good. Very good. Good job.
Okay.
Excellent.
Yeah, thank you very much, Pak Tom, for sharing with us about the 21st century challenge of water quality. And I think you have made summary about what is the highlight point that should be concerned about the water quality. It's about the groundwater exploitation and also about the emerging pollutants. And I think it's very interesting. In your slide, there I show caffeine, right? Caffeine as a pollutant for water. We know that now what I see today, the coffee shop are getting or growing so fast in Yogyakarta and also in other places. Maybe it's one of the source that the caffeine contamination in water, maybe, yeah. Maybe we should do the research about that, because so many coffee shops are built in our area like that. And then about the solution, maybe we also can do our research about the riverbank filtration that you said before, and also about the pollution prevention. I also agree with that, because this is the most effective and efficient step to reduce or maybe prevent the pollution happen like that. Okay, for the audience, please, if you have any question, you can talk directly to Professor Thomas.
Mungkin saya mendahului boleh ya Mbak ya?
Nggih, monggo.
Okay. All right, thank you Pak Tom. This is very interesting. Pak Eko and Bu Ani, I think still here, still in the Zoom with this webinar. So it is very interesting, the challenge, and it is our challenge for the Indo-US research opportunities for the RPF. I think very not very complicated, but very interesting and not very costly, I think. For example, but the problem for the urban areas, we have problem with E. coli and so on. So we can find the specific location in around the Sleman or Jogja or Bantul maybe, so we can make a kind of pilot project in the future. Pak Eko is from BPPM, Bu Ani from this department. I think we can collaborate and supported by ICMI, by ICMI. I think very good. Terima kasih Mbak Ima.
Baik, terima kasih Profesor Widodo. Baik, monggo teman-teman semua, Bapak Ibu yang bergabung, jika ada pertanyaan yang ingin disampaikan kepada Profesor Thomas Boving, silahkan via chat atau mungkin secara langsung ya dengan raise hand seperti itu. Dipersilakan.
Kalau belum ada, saya boleh nanya lagi, komentar aja lah.
Oke, boleh.
Pak Tom, concerning about the water stress, like what you mentioned before, we have serious water stress in Java, like we mentioned a few minutes ago. And the government has policy to move our capital from Jakarta to Kalimantan. Is one of the reasons why Jakarta has very serious problem on water, air quality, and many things. But there are so many hot issues also in Kalimantan, especially for the deforestation and also for water itself, because we don't have, I think, our groundwater in IKN, what we call IKN, IKN, Ibu Kota, apa IKN, Ibu Kota Negara Nusantara ya, Ibu Kota Nusantara ya, ya. This is the candidate of our new capital. Do you have any idea about that? Do you have any? Maybe you have read already some news. Some it is not concerning about the politics, but it's concerning about the interest of water and ecosystem in general. Thank you.
Right. That's a very good question. In the US, I've been reading about this plan moving Jakarta to Kalimantan. And let's say this is a very ambitious project. And I guess there are plans to make it as sustainable as possible. The problem often is that sustainability is not fully understood by those who implement these projects. Sustainability is often more like I wouldn't say an illusion, but a lofty goal that is not really sustainable. Meaning it requires hard data. It requires investigations of how much groundwater is available at the new place in Kalimantan. What is the quality of the groundwater? How much is safe to extract without over-exploiting the resource? And it is easy to say we do it sustainably, but as scientists, we know that we need data, we need investigations, we need models, we need analysis to be able to say with some certainty, it is safe to take out this much water without destroying the environment. And the same is true for all the other natural resources. I understand the new capital is supposed to be the greenest in the world, but at the same time, it requires cutting down large forests to build the capital in the first place. Again, what is sustainability, right? I mean, so yes, it's also a politically charged problem. I know that too. Jakarta is sinking. Jakarta is, I don't think we can save Jakarta from itself. It is basically a wreck. And if we wait a couple more years, half of it will be underwater, and that's how it is. So I understand something needs to get done, but to rush into a new area without engineering, sustainability analysis, scientific analysis, it's very dangerous. And I think we need the time to make it right. Otherwise, we're just repeating mistakes. And that's even more costly for our children. And yeah, it will not be good if we mess this up because we didn't do our homework. That's kind of a failing grade in my class.
All right, yeah. So if you don't have any very deep analysis, deep plan and deep study, maybe we just move the problem from Jakarta is moved to Kalimantan.
Possibly. I mean, again, you can do it right, or you can do it incorrect. I mean, it's basically we need to use our knowledge, our academic, our scientific knowledge and put it to the best use. And this will take time, I understand, but that's why we have these really good universities in Indonesia, like UEE and many others, and we train students to do this. We have to ask ourselves, if we don't put those young minds to work and ensure that they work for a greener better sustainable future using what they learned, why do we even bother teaching them, right?
Yes, you're right. All right, thank you very much, Pak Tom.
Okay, thank you, Pak Tom dan Prof. Widodo. There is message coming to me, Prof. Tom. There is a question. There are two questions. The first is about the waste medicine issues in the river. Maybe about last year in the news, we hear that there is a paracetamol waste that coming to the Citarum River. How is your opinion about that, and how we can prevent that so that will not happen again like that? And then the second is about the riverbank filtration. We know that the riverbank filtration use filter naturally by the natural component inside the earth like that. So how long we can get the water from the well that we determine like that? Yeah.
All right, let me answer the last question first about the riverbank filtration technology. How long does it work? There are riverbank filtration systems in Germany that work for 120 years already. Along the Rhine River, which also was very polluted 30 years ago, it was unfit, you couldn't swim there, the fish were dying. Yet the riverbank filtration system that supports the town of Düsseldorf has been working successfully for 120 years. And why is this? Because these natural treatment systems are, we call them auto-regenerative. That means they continue continuously, because some of it is bacteria action, so bacteria eating other bacteria. That keeps going, keeps going, keeps going. Also, when a river is carrying high water, it pushes out contaminants that have been deposited. So we're starting with new filter material. And all these processes are basically auto-regenerative, meaning that a riverbank filtration system can last for decades, maybe even longer. About the other question about the paracetamol in Jakarta River. So paracetamol is a very common medication. It's a painkiller, if I'm not mistaken, so we're probably all using it if we have a headache. How does it get into the river? Because we take it, we go to the bathroom, and the water goes away. There's no treatment. In much of Jakarta, there aren't any wastewater treatment systems. That's how it gets into the river. The way to prevent this from happening is to treat the water before it gets into the river. The treated water should be free of paracetamol and all these other contaminants, meaning if we treat the water, the river water quality will be increasing to the degree that you can probably even use the water for swimming or fishing, which nobody does today, I hope. But we need drinking water, wastewater treatment plants. We need a lot of them.
Yeah, thank you, Prof. Tom, for the explanation. Saya undang kembali kepada para audiens. Mungkin ada, oh ya. Okay, there is someone who raised hand here. Okay, tadi saya melihat Mbak Baik ya, Mbak Ode. Oke, Mbak Ode. Okay, Mbak Ode, please deliver your question.
Yeah, thank you, Bu Irma. Thank you for the information, Mr. Boving. One of my questions is, Indonesia is now strange to bottled water because our tap water is undrinkable here. It's different. It's maybe the same with America, but it's in Europe country, they drink water from the tap. So do you have any comment about our clean water system here? So maybe we can do something about that situation. And there's also many places in Indonesia, we only boil our water before we drink it. What do you think about that? Is it also bridge technology that you can approve? And thank you.
Very good questions. So yes, there are issues with drinking water quality in Indonesia, and not just in Indonesia. It's a problem in many countries. In some places, like you said, you can drink water from the faucet, and that's great. But in Indonesia, you know that if you don't treat the water, there's a good chance you will experience some sort of waterborne diseases like your stomach or whatever. So this is very common. And what's missing is basically, or what we need is an improvement in the infrastructure. So let's say we have a treated water coming from the drinking water treatment plant. It's clean, it meets all the standards. On the way to your home, there can be so many points where the water gets contaminated, like a break in the pipeline. Then that means that clean water gets in contact with sewage water, the two mix, and that's how you get bacteria into the clean drinking water. So if we don't maintain our infrastructure, then we can do nothing about keeping the system from failing. So that's one thing. Other areas don't even have safe drinking water to begin with. And then it's very obvious that if you, let's say, pump water from an open well or from a shallow well, that there is a lot of reason, or we know the water is contaminated with bacteria. So you said some people boil their water. And yeah, boiling helps for killing of bacteria and maybe viruses and protozoa. So pathogens can be treated by boiling, but boiling doesn't address heavy metals, and it also doesn't address emerging contaminants. Also, boiling requires fossil fuels. People use either wood or other materials for boiling the water. This has a carbon footprint. And if one person does it, it's okay. But if 300 million people do it, that's a different story. So boiling is energy intensive, and it's something I would recommend doing in an emergency, but as a standard solution, it's not sustainable. That is my answer to your question.
Gimana, Mbak Ode? It's clear.
Yeah. I'm also curious about the situation in America. How can you drink your tap water if it's not a problem to answer? Thank you.
Yeah, no, we're lucky, and lucky means we waited for this maybe 30, 40 years. So there are areas 30, 40 years in the US that pretty much look like Indonesia today in terms of water quality. There was a lot of untreated sewage, a lot of industrial sewage being discharged, contaminating a lot of groundwater. And it was 1970 when the US EPA was finally put in place, and then things started to change. These laws, environmental laws, were put into place, and then people who polluted the environment were all of a sudden responsible to clean it up, meaning a big polluter, a big industry had to pay for drinking water for water treatment, had to pay for cleaning up the polluted river. And it took 30 years to the point where we are today that our environment has been cleaned up. So in most places, people can swim in rivers, can drink the water from the faucet, because they're drinking water treatment plants. There are environmental engineers that take maintain the system. And this is the big difference. We take our environment now very serious, and we're happy to pay the high price it costs to change our environment to the better. That means we have high taxes to pay for this. We have hefty fines for polluters to pay for the cleanup, and we have a strong environmental protection agency that makes sure everybody sticks to the rules. Again, it takes a long time and it's not cheap. It's controversial because industry first was very, very opposed to this because it cost money. But then the youth, the young people demanded change. They said, okay, we don't buy your products if you don't clean up, right? I mean, if your company is a big polluter, we're not going to buy your products, for example. And this initiated rethinking by the industry. And nowadays, industry is actually making advertising that they are using green processes that are sustainable. And so that we basically see a complete turnaround from 30 years ago when industry was like, no, 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 we don't want anything to do with cleanup. And now they're saying, okay, we are the cleanest in the world, please buy from us. And that's great. So this is a change in attitude, but it takes time to realize.
Okay, thank you for Boving. So it's like extended producent responsibility, right? How to clean the environment.
Sorry, can you repeat that question? I missed it.
It's sorry, it's mostly because there's extended producer responsibility, where the producer is responsible for their product, for the environment that make the change happen also in America.
Yeah, people are responsible. So if I, for example, cause a pollution problem, let's say I have a leak in my oil tank. We use oil for heating. So let's say the oil tank has a hole and now the oil is going into neighbor's well. The Environmental Protection Agency will come to me on knocking on my door and they're going to tell me I have to pay for the cleanup or go to jail. So it is very simple. It is the person or the company that causes the pollution problem has to pay for the cleanup. Yeah, that's how it works.
Oke, ya. Mbak Ode sudah cukup?
Sudah cukup. Terima kasih.
Ya, terima kasih Mbak Ode atas pertanyaannya ya. Oke, Mbak Tiara, silakan. Tidak masalah jika tidak bisa on cam.
Hello. Ini suaranya kedengaran nggak, Bu?
Ya, kedengaran.
Okay, thank you. Okay, good afternoon, Mr. Boving. I'm sorry I can't connect my camera because that was a trouble on my camera. Okay, thank you for the explanation. As we know, like Indonesia is a country rich in water resources, right? And water quality problems are amplified by emerging contaminants, right? As you said. So, what's your point of view about what role do individuals and local communities play in tackling water quality issues caused by emerging contaminants, especially in Indonesia? And how can public awareness and participation can be increased to foster a sustainable solution?
Very good question. Yeah, like I said, pollution prevention is the trick. It is the easiest we can do to make a big difference. So, for example, a community can come together and offer to collect unused pharmaceuticals, let's say. You know, they have an expiration date, they're not of use anymore. So people usually throw them out or put them in the toilet. But a community could organize a collection place where all these pharmaceuticals being collected. And when there is a big amount, then they can take them to either a regulated landfill that can handle these type of contaminants, or ideally bring them back to the manufacturer, right? I mean, that would be great if you had a closed loop where the manufacturer, the pharma companies, take back unused medication. But these are small steps. So communities should come together. It also means there should be education at the community level, meaning most people don't even know about the problem, about emerging contaminants. So we need to educate our children, our grandkids, our parents, or grandparents that it is not okay to take old medication and throw them into the river or into the toilet. So education together with an option, an easy option to collect and then dispose excess emerging contaminants is a very easy thing to do. It just takes people who come together and want to see change, and you can't wait for the government. That's another thing I learned in the US. If you want change, it has to come from you, and mostly young people, right? I mean, young people have so much to gain from a better environment that young people often take the initiative to have these community-led efforts. And I think it's very easy. I think it is a very good way to create awareness. And then it can go bigger. Let's say, all right, you can advise home builders how to put in working septic systems. You can advise apartment buyers, for example, not to buy an apartment that doesn't have a septic system. That will create pressure on developers to listen to their customers and then, for example, build houses with functioning septic systems. So again, it's all about education of the community. And this is, again, where our students should play a big role. They're smart. We taught them what they need to know. And they're the best people to be in the community and tell their parents, to tell their grandparents, to tell their children what they learned and how to change the environment for the better. That's my long answer.
Okay, got it. Thank you for the explanation, Professor.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mbak Tiara, and also Pak Boving, because we have a limited time, and now time shows at 5:19 p.m. So maybe this is the end of our webinar in this afternoon. Maybe there is a closing statement, maybe from Pak Widodo or maybe Bu Ani, about the joint research opportunities that Prof. Tom said before, maybe.
Ya, Bu Ani itu yang merespon. Saya mendorong.
Ya, baik. Okay. Thank you very much, Ibu Ima. Related to the, it's a very interesting opportunity for a joint research. I think it is very possible. Maybe actually in the, maybe some 5 or 6 years ago, maybe Pak Widodo, you still remember that we also have one research project related to Riverbank Filtration. Maybe you still remember with the German? Yeah, with Bu Juta. With Bu Juta, yeah, with Bu Juta. So
we have experience with.
We have once.
I think 2 years. This is 2 years.
2 years.
2 years program, but not for the time. Only for many months only, but 2 years.
Yes, so maybe we can actually we have started this research before, not research, but it's also already implemented, yeah, Pak Widodo.
Yeah.
Already
it's
implemented.
part of the capacity building and also community services for Bantul PDAM and also for the community of Bantul.
Yes, I think we can maybe revive again these topics in the future. Maybe we shall find a partner maybe to start again this topic. I think it's very interesting and will be one of the answer to cope with water quality problem, especially in the Jakarta area. I think we can start, Pak Widodo.
I think Bu Ani, I think we can also try to focus on RPF,
yes.
Riverbank, yeah. Because
yeah.
our soil, our geological factors already good here.
Yes, that's right. So we have some possible finding, I think. So with Breen maybe, we don't know.
With Breen, with Teknik, and with Paiko.
With Paiko, yes, with internal.
A lot of money from DPP.
What we can do is preparing proposal, Romavit.
Yes.
Writing proposal together with Pak Tom, and then we submit.
I think so.
Yes.
So we are meeting Monday.
Yes, we can start. Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Bu Ani, Pak Eko, Prof. Widodo, and Pak Tom. Before we close this webinar, there is a photo session. So please, for the audience, you can open your camera. Oke, Mbak Ratna atau Mas Heri sudah?
Pak Heri.
Oke. Udah ya?
Belum semuanya, Mbak, nunggu open ini dulu. Ya.
Oke, kayaknya sudah aja Mas Heri.
Mas, Mas. Sebentar ya Bapak Ibu.
Wah, ini bagus, background-nya Mas Maulana bagus itu. Oh, sayang kan nggak pada YouTube ya videonya.
Namun, Mas Heri, kirim.
Udah terlihat Pak Eko udah pengen banget drop.
Sama nggih?
Yeah.
Oke, nggih. Baik, terima kasih. Nggih, matur suwun, terima kasih semuanya, and I would like to say thank you once more to Prof. Tom that has shared his knowledge about the water quality to all of us. I think that this topic is very interesting, and we gain many new knowledge about the water quality, and we hope that like this webinar can we follow up and can we conduct every time you came to Yogyakarta, like that. And also thank you for the audience, and I'd like to end this webinar. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you very much. Terima kasih.
Thank you so much, Pak Boving.
Thank you. Bye bye everybody. Nice